Welcome back to the deep end. We have arrived. This is it, the full circle moment.
It really is, isn't it? It feels a bit like a graduation day, you know?
It does. We've spent months, so much time wading through the alphabet soup of pharmacology.
Oh, yeah. The PK, the PD, the inhibitors, the inducers, receptor subtypes. It's been a lot.
It's been a long road. But today, we are not introducing a new drug class. We're not memorizing a new side effect profile.
Oh.
We are going back to the very beginning. But we're looking at it through the lens of, well, everything we now know.
We're talking about the operating system of clinical therapeutics.
That's a perfect way to frame it, because when you first start medical training, pharmacokinetics PKs, it's usually taught as just a series of abstract definitions.
Oh, absolutely. You just memorize that V is volume of distribution and CL is clearance. You learn the formulas, you pass the exam, and you move on.
And then you hit the wards or the clinic, and you realize very quickly that those definitions are actually the only thing standing between your patient and a toxic overdose or a complete therapeutic failure.
Exactly. We are calling this session Dosing by Design. And look, that sounds elegant, but let's be real. Most of the time, dosing just feels like following a recipe.
Right. You look up the drug in a handbook, you check the renal function, find the row that matches, and you pick the number.
So why do we need a design philosophy for that? It seems like it's already done for us.
Well, that's the core tension we really need to unpack today, because that recipe, it assumes you're cooking for a standard dinner guest.
Right.
But in the clinic, you're almost never, ever treating the standard man.
The standard man is a myth. He's a statistical ghost. He doesn't exist.
He really doesn't.
In reality, you're treating, say, a 90-year-old grandmother with heart failure, or a 30-year-old bodybuilder with a failing liver, or a patient with massive edema.
And if you just follow the recipe in the book, the one that was designed for that statistical ghost, you might actually hurt them.
You absolutely will. The design part is about taking that static number from the page and molding it to the biological chaos that's sitting right in front of you.
So we're moving from a lookup table to a dynamic model. And to do that, we are synthesizing our two heavy hitters. We have Kitsung and Trevor's Basic and Clinical Pharmacology, specifically the chapter on rational dosing, which gives us the conceptual scaffolding.
Yeah, for the hard data, for the numbers themselves, we have the Bible, Goodman and Gilman's, the pharmacological basis of therapeutics, specifically Appendix 2.
Which I have to admit, I used to find terrifying. It's just page after page of these dense tables of numbers.
It is intimidating.
Yeah.
But that appendix is where the rubber meets the road. It's where all those theoretical equations we learned meet the actual numbers for hundreds of real drugs.
Okay.
Our goal today is to teach you how to read that appendix, not as a list of facts to be memorized, but as a set of tools to solve clinical puzzles.
Right. Before we start building this model, a quick disclaimer. This deep dive is an interpretive synthesis. We're building a conceptual map. We are not replacing the textbooks.
Please don't think that. If you're a student, you still need to read the chapters. If you're a clinician, you have to check the latest guidelines. We're here to help you understand the why, but the what still requires your active study.
Let's look at the roadmap then. We're going to break this down into the architecture of dosing. First, we'll look at the fundamental hypothesis that connects dose to effect.
Then we'll take apart the two main pillars of any drug regimen: maintenance doses and loading doses.
Which naturally brings in the human variable. How do things like obesity, age, and organ failure completely break the math?
And finally, we'll talk about the target concentration strategy, which is really about the feedback loop of measuring and revising your plan.
Which is really about safety versus precision. Using math to guide your judgment, not replace it.
That's the whole game.
Okay, let's jump in. Section 1. The fundamental hypothesis and the framework. Kitsung kicks this off with a diagram. It's figure 3.1, and it's basically a bridge. On one side of the bridge, you have dose. On the other side, you have effect. And the thing that connects them, the bridge itself, is concentration.
And this distinguishes our two main players. Pharmacokinetics, or PK, is the input side. It's what the body does to the drug. Absorption, distribution, elimination, all of that governs the concentration in the blood.
And pharmacodynamics, PD, is the output side. It's what the drug does to the body, and that governs the response you get from that concentration.
The bridge, as you said, is this concept of target concentration. And this is the fundamental hypothesis of all rational dosing. We are making an assumption.
What's the assumption?
We assume that there's a specific concentration of the drug in the blood that reflects a balance. An optimal trade-off between the good stuff we want, the therapeutic benefit, and the bad stuff we want to avoid, the toxicity.
So the goal isn't just give 500 milligrams. The goal is achieve the target concentration. The dose is just the blunt instrument we use to try and get there.
Correct. But here's where we immediately fall into the first trap. Kitsung calls this the trap of linearity.
Right.
It's this intuitive belief that if 5 milligrams is good, then 10 milligrams must be twice as good. If I double the dose, I double the effect.
But biology just doesn't work on a straight line.
No, it works on a curve, usually a hyperbolic curve. Eventually, you run out of targets to hit. You reach what we call Emax, the maximum possible effect.
They use ACE inhibitors as the example here, specifically enalapril. And when I looked at the data on this, it actually surprised me. Enalapril has a relatively short half-life, right? Something like 4 hours.
Roughly, yeah.
In that ballpark.
So, okay, if the half-life is 4 hours, then in a 24-hour period, that's 6 half-lives. The drug should be, for all intents and purposes, gone from the blood.
It should be.
Yet we dose it once a day, and it controls blood pressure for the full 24 hours. Mathematically, that feels like it shouldn't work. It shouldn't work if the relationship were linear. But you have to think about the mechanism. What is enalapril actually doing?
It's blocking the ACE enzyme.
Right. When you take that standard pill, you absolutely flood the system. You might have 100 times more drug molecules floating around than there are ACE enzymes to block. You've achieved 100% saturation.
So you have a massive surplus.
Yeah.
A huge buffer.
Massive. So, okay, 4 hours later, half the drug is gone, but you still have 50 times more drug than you need. Another 4 hours go by, half is gone again. You still have a huge surplus.
I see.
You can wash out 90%, even 95% of the drug from the plasma, and the tiny amount that's left is still high enough to be well above the C50, the concentration you need for 50% effect.
So the effect outlasts the drug's presence in the blood.
Effectively, yes. You've bought yourself this huge buffer. Because the initial concentration was so incredibly high relative to the target's affinity, the enzyme stays handcuffed long after the plasma levels have plummeted.
That is such a crucial distinction. The duration of effect is not the same thing as the half-life of the drug.
It rarely is.
Yeah.
And, that disconnect goes the other way, too. Sometimes the drug is there, but the effect hasn't happened yet.
The famous lag time, Kitsung brings up warfarin as the classic case here.
Warfarin is a perfect example of this mechanism versus effect idea. We know warfarin inhibits an enzyme in the liver called VKOR. It stops the recycling of vitamin K.
And that inhibition happens fast. As soon as the drug is absorbed and hits the liver, that enzyme is pretty much shut down.
Within hours, for sure. But if you measure the patient's INR, their clotting time, it doesn't move. It doesn't budge. You could give a massive dose of warfarin, shut down every single VKR enzyme in the body, and 12 hours later, that patient's blood will still clot perfectly normal.
Why? I mean, if the enzyme is off, why is the blood still clotting?
Because the clinical effect, the thinning of the blood, doesn't come from inhibiting the enzyme. It comes from the disappearance of the clotting factors that are already circulating in the bloodstream.
Oh, right.
Warfarin stops you from making new factors, but it does absolutely nothing to the ones you made yesterday.
So you have to wait for the old supply to run out.
Exactly. You are literally waiting for the natural decay. Prothrombin, for example, has a half-life of about 60 hours. Factor VII is shorter, maybe 6 hours. But essentially, you are waiting for this pool of proteins to drain. You cannot rush biology.
So in this case, the lag isn't pharmacokinetic. The drug is already where it needs to be. The lag is purely physiological.
And this drives clinicians crazy. They give a dose, they check the INR the next morning, they see no change, and they think, I need to give more. So they stack another dose on top.
And then 3 days later, all the factors die off at once, and the patient's INR shoots up and they bleed out.
Precisely. You have to respect that physiological delay. You can't outsmart it.
Okay, let's move to section 2. We've established the goal is a target concentration. Now, how do we keep it there? This is the architecture of dosing, and we'll start with maintenance.
Maintenance dosing is all about what I call the hydraulic metaphor. I want you to visualize the body as a tank of water.
Okay.
You have a faucet pouring water in. That's your input, your dose. And you have a drain at the bottom letting water out. That's your clearance.
And the goal is to keep a steady level in the tank. Rate in equals rate out. That's steady state.
Simple enough. Now, here's the question where I usually trip people up. If I want to maintain a specific level in that tank, does the size of the tank matter?
Intuitively, my first reaction is yes. If
Okay.
I have a swimming pool versus a bathtub, don't I need more water for the pool?
To fill it, yes, 100%. But we're not talking about filling it yet. We're talking about maintaining the level once it's already full.
Okay, I see where you're going.
Imagine the bathtub is full. Imagine the swimming pool is full. Both of them have a drain at the bottom that releases exactly 1 liter of water per minute. How much water do you need to add to the bathtub to keep the level steady?
1 liter per minute.
And the swimming pool.
1 liter per minute.
Bingo. The size of the tank, which is our volume of distribution, is completely irrelevant for the maintenance dose. The only thing that dictates your maintenance dose is the clearance. How big is the drain?
That is very counterintuitive, but when you put it that way, it makes perfect sense. So the equation is essentially just maintenance dose equals clearance times the target concentration.
That's it. MD equals CL times TC. It is a beautiful, simple, elegant relationship. If the clearance drops, if the drain gets clogged because the kidneys are failing, you just turn down the faucet. You lower the maintenance dose.
Let's talk about that drain, the clearance. Katsung mentions that clearance is additive.
Right. The body has multiple drains. You've got renal clearance through the kidneys, hepatic clearance through the liver, maybe some lung clearance or enzymes in the blood that chew up the drug. The total clearance is just the sum of all of them.
Which means if one organ fails, like the kidneys, the total clearance drops, but it doesn't necessarily go to zero.
Correct. And we also have to account for the gatekeepers of the faucet, and that's bioavailability, which we call F.
This applies when we're dosing orally, because not every part of a pill you swallow actually makes it into your bloodstream.
Not even close for some drugs. The liver acts like a toll booth. We call this the first pass effect. Everything you absorb from your gut goes straight to the liver through the portal vein before it reaches the rest of your body.
And the liver takes a cut.
It takes a big cut for some drugs. We call this the extraction ratio. Some drugs are high extraction. The liver is a very aggressive toll booth. Morphine is the classic example here. The liver extracts about 67% of morphine on the first pass.
So if I take a 100 milligram pill of morphine orally, only about 33 milligrams makes it past that toll booth and into my systemic circulation.
Roughly, yes. And that's why oral doses of morphine are so much higher than IV doses. But now compare that to diazepam or Valium. It's the low extraction drug. The liver barely touches it. It lets almost all of it through on the first pass.
Why does this distinction matter so much clinically?
Think about liver disease. Think about a patient with cirrhosis. In advanced cirrhosis, the liver becomes scarred and hard. Blood can't push through it easily. So the body creates these shunts, collateral vessels, that bypass the liver entirely.
So it's like a smuggler's route. It avoids the toll booth.
It is a smuggler's route. The blood from the gut goes straight to the heart without getting filtered by the liver. Now, what happens to that dose of morphine?
Well, normally 67% gets taken out. But if it skips the liver,
Suddenly, 100% gets through. You have effectively tripled the dose that's reaching the brain just because of that shunt. You can kill a cirrhosis patient with a standard dose of oral morphine because their bioavailability has skyrocketed.
wow. But for a drug like diazepam,
It matters much less. The liver wasn't taking much out of the first pass anyway, so bypassing the toll booth doesn't change the blood levels nearly as dramatically.
that is a fascinating nuance. It's not just that metabolism is slow in liver failure. It's about the actual anatomy of blood flow.
It's plumbing. So much of pharmacology is just plumbing.
Okay, so maintenance is all about matching the drain. But let's go back to your tank analogy. What if the tank is empty? We can't wait for the faucet to slowly fill it up using the maintenance rate.
And that brings us to section 3, the loading dose. This is all about the problem of time. If you just start a maintenance infusion, purely mathematically, it takes roughly 4 to 5 half-lives to reach steady state.
And if a drug has a half-life of 24 hours,
You're waiting 4 or 5 days to reach therapeutic levels.
if I'm having a seizure status epilepticus or a severe asthma attack or some chaotic arrhythmia, I don't have 4 days, I might not have 4 minutes.
Precisely. You need the tank full now. That is the entire purpose of a loading dose.
Yeah.
And unlike maintenance, the loading dose is all about the volume of distribution.
Now the size of the tank matters.
Now it matters. You are filling the tank. And the equation is simple. Loading dose equals volume of distribution times your target concentration. LD equals VD times TC.
Let's do a deep dive on this volume of distribution, VD, because Katsung and Goodman and Gilman both make a big point that this isn't a literal bucket of blood.
No, not at all. It's an apparent volume. It's a mathematical scaling factor. Think of it this way. If I inject 100 milligrams of a drug into the body, and then I measure the blood concentration and find that it's tiny, the math says, wow, the tank must be huge for that concentration to be so dilute.
But in reality, the drug isn't in some huge tank of water. it's hiding somewhere.
It's hiding in the tissues. Take digoxin. Digoxin loves muscle. It binds with high affinity to the NAB plus K plus ATPase pumps in skeletal muscle. So you give the dose, it zips out of the blood and sticks to all the muscle in the body. The blood level looks low.
So the V calculates out to be massive.
Massive, something like 500 liters, which is way more fluid than is actually in a human body. It's a virtual volume.
Okay.
But compare that to an antibiotic like gentamicin. Gentamicin is hydrophilic. It loves water. It stays in the blood and the extracellular fluid. It doesn't hide in tissue. It's viewed as small, roughly equal to the body's actual extracellular water volume.
So why does this matter for the loading dose? Let's introduce a patient. Let's call her Mrs. Jones. She's 85, she has heart failure, and she's in atrial fibrillation. We need to load her with digoxin to control her heart rate.
Okay, Mrs. Jones. Because of her age and her heart failure, she's frail. She has lost a significant amount of muscle mass, sarcopenia.
If digoxin binds to muscle and she doesn't have much muscle.
Her storage space is gone, her tank has shrunk. If you look at the standard man loading dose for digoxin, it assumes a healthy guy with a normal amount of muscle. If you give that dose to Mrs. Jones, you will overflow her small tank. You will cause massive toxicity.
So for digoxin, V80 is completely dependent on muscle mass.
Yes. But let's flip it. Say Mrs. Jones has heart failure and her kidneys shut down. She swells up. She has 10 liters of edema fluid in her legs and her lungs. And now she gets a septic infection. You need to give her gentamicin.
And gentamicin lives in water.
And she has a ton of extra water. Her tank has gotten bigger. If you give the standard loading dose of gentamicin, it will dilute into all that edema fluid, and the concentration in the blood will be too low to kill the bacteria. You'll fail therapeutically.
So for this one patient, Mrs. Jones, you need to decrease the digoxin load because she lacks muscle, but you have to increase the gentamicin load because she has excess water.
Exactly. You are mentally modeling the compartments of her body in real time. That is dosing by design.
Now, there's a warning in Katsung about loading doses. It says, slow administration is prudent.
This is the speed kills rule. It's so important. Even if your math is perfect, you calculated the exact right loading dose to fill the tank. You have to remember that distribution takes time.
The drug needs a minute to spread out.
It does. If you push a loading dose of phenytoin for seizures intravenously too fast, it hits the heart in this super concentrated bolus before it has time to distribute to the rest of the body's tissues. It hasn't found its way into the tank yet. It's just a shock wave in the blood.
And that shock wave can cause arrhythmias and severe hypotension.
You essentially poison the heart transiently because you didn't give the distribution phase a chance to happen. You have to pour it in gently, let it equilibrate.
Okay, let's move to section 4. Time, accumulation, and half-life. We throw the term half-life around all the time. Oh, the half-life is 6 hours. But Katsung makes the point that half-life is a derived parameter.
It is. We tend to think of half-life as this fundamental fixed property of a drug, like its color or its density. What is the atomic weight of gold? What is the half-life of digoxin? But it's not fixed at all. Half-life is a result.
A result of what?
It's the result of the battle between volume and clearance. Think about the tank again. If the volume gets bigger, it takes longer to drain, right? So the half-life goes up. If the clearance gets bigger, it drains faster. The half-life goes down.
So the equation is basically TOs equals something like 0.7 times the volume divided by clearance.
That's the one. It shows you that relationship. And this explains the clinical paradox that Katsung mentions with digoxin in renal failure. This is a real trap for young doctors.
How so?
It's a classic. In renal failure, the clearance of digoxin drops dramatically. The drain is clogged, so you would expect the half-life to skyrocket.
If the drain is clogged, the water stays in the tank longer. Makes sense.
Right. But remember, our patient, Mrs. Jones, in renal failure, patients are often uremic. They lose their appetite, they lose weight, they lose muscle. So her volume of her VEED has also dropped.
So the numerator in the equation V drops, and the denominator CL also drops.
Exactly. And they can cancel each other out to some degree. The half-life might not look that different. A healthy person might have a digoxin half-life of 40 hours. Mrs. Jones, in severe renal failure, might also have a half-life of 40 hours.
So you look at the half-life and you think, oh, she's clearing it just fine.
But you'd be dead wrong. Her clearance is terrible. She just has a smaller tank to clear. If you give her the standard maintenance dose based on that normal half-life, you will kill her. You need to lower the dose drastically.
That is sneaky. You have to look at the primary parameters V and CL, not just the summary parameter of half-life.
Always look at the primary parameters. Half-life is just the shadow they cast.
Let's talk about accumulation. The sawtooth pattern.
Right. If you give a drug via continuous IV infusion, the level rises smoothly and then flattens out at steady state. Nice flat line. But, we don't usually walk around with IV poles. We take pills.
Right, intermittent dosing.
So the level goes up to a peak after the dose, and then it goes down to a trough before the next dose. Up and down, up and down. It looks like the teeth of a saw.
And there's this rule of thumb. If you dose once every half-life, the accumulation factor is 2.
Meaning that at steady state, your peak concentration will be exactly twice as high as the peak of your very first dose. And your trough will be exactly twice as high as the trough from that first dose. The whole curve just shifts upward.
Why do we care about the shape of those teeth, the peaks and troughs?
Because the peaks are where toxicity happens, and the troughs are where therapeutic failure happens. If the peak is too high, you get side effects, maybe tremors with lithium or ototoxicity with gentamicin. If the trough is too low, the bacteria start growing again before the next antibiotic dose.
This is the entire reason for extended-release formulations, right?
Exactly. An extended-release pill is just a clever way to mechanically smooth out that sawtooth. You chop off the dangerous peaks, and you fill in the ineffective troughs. You try to mimic that flat line of a continuous infusion, but with the convenience of a pill.
Okay. Moving on to Section 5. The human variable. This is where we take the standard man, that 70-kilogram mythical creature from the textbook, and we throw him out the window.
Let's explicitly kill the ghost. If you look at Goodman and Gilman's Appendix 2, in Table AII-1, it lists all these parameters for a healthy 70-kilo adult. But our patient, Mrs. Jones, is 85, has stage 3 kidney disease, and weighs 45 kilos.
And if you use the table values directly for her...
You are not treating Mrs. Jones. You are treating the ghost.
Let's start with the kidneys. Renal function adjustments. We use creatinine clearance as our proxy for the glomerular filtration rate, the GFR.
But even that is tricky, because where does creatinine come from? It comes from muscle breakdown.
And Mrs. Jones has no muscle.
She's not making much creatinine, so her lab report might come back and say her serum creatinine is 1.0 milli-UDL, which, on paper, looks totally normal.
It looks normal. But for her, a frail, elderly woman, a creatinine of 1.0 is a disaster. It implies her kidneys are barely working. They're filtering so little that even her tiny amount of creatinine production is building up to that normal level. You have to use an equation like Cockcroft-Gault or MDRD to reveal the truth. Okay, so we do that. We calculate her actual clearance. We find out it's only 30% of normal. So do we just cut every single drug dose she takes by 70%?
No, that's a common mistake. This is where Goodman and Gilman gives us a magic number from that table. Thessalate singina, the fraction excreted unchanged in the urine.
This basically asks the question, how much does this specific drug care about the kidney?
That's a perfect way to put it. Take vancomycin. Its fetalysis high, maybe 0.9. It relies on the kidney for 90% of its elimination.
So if the kidney fails, vancomycin has almost nowhere else to go.
Right. So for Mrs. Jones, you need a massive dose reduction, a huge adjustment. But now compare that to, say, ceftriaxone. Its phenylalanine for renal elimination is very low. It's mostly cleared by the biliary system, through the liver and into the gut.
So for ceftriaxone, the kidney is just a bystander.
Mostly. So
Yeah.
even if Mrs. Jones has terrible kidneys, you barely need to touch the ceftriaxone dose. The liver is still doing all the work.
So the logic is, look at the patient's renal function. Then look at how much the drug relies on the kidney, its fetanidols. You combine those two pieces of information to get your renal factor and make an intelligent adjustment.
Precisely. Don't just reflexively lower all the doses. Ask the mechanism.
Let's talk about obesity. This is a huge issue in modern medicine. The question always is, which weight do we use for our calculations? Total body weight or fat-free mass?
And the answer, of course, is, it depends. It depends on the drug's personality. Is it lipophilic, meaning fat-loving, or is it hydrophilic, water-loving?
Take a drug like theophylline.
Theophylline is reasonably water-soluble, but it distributes pretty well into total body water. And here's a fun fact. Adipose tissue, fat, is about 10 to 20% water.
So the drug can enter the fat tissue to some extent.
Yes. So the theophylline, dosing based on the total body weight, including all the fat, is usually acceptable. It's not perfect, but it's close enough for most clinical situations.
But digoxin again, a troublemaker.
Digoxin is lipophobic. It hates fat. It does not enter fat tissue. It stays in the lean mass in the muscle. So if you have a patient who weighs 150 kilograms, but 70 kilos of that is adipose tissue, and you dose their digoxin based on the full 150 kilos.
You're dosing for a huge tank that doesn't actually exist for that drug.
You will massively overdose them. For digoxin in an obese patient, you must use their fat-free mass. You have to mentally or mathematically subtract the fat from the equation.
One last variable in this section, protein binding. Some calls this a red herring.
This is one of my favorite debunkings in all of pharmacology. You will often hear people say, oh, this drug displaces that drug from albumin, so the free levels will spike and cause toxicity.
And it sounds logical. If the drug isn't bound to protein, it's free to act on the body.
It sounds perfectly logical. But here's the catch. The body is an open system, not a closed test tube. If the free drug level spikes, what else happens?
Well, the liver and the kidneys see more free drug available to them.
Exactly. Clearance depends on the free fraction. So if the free drug concentration doubles, the rate of clearance also doubles. The body just eliminates it faster.
So it balances itself out. It auto-corrects.
Almost immediately, the free concentration returns to its previous steady state. Now, the total concentration in the blood might drop because you have less bound drug circulating, but the active free concentration, which is the only thing that matters for effect, stays the same.
So clinically, toxicity from displacement alone is extremely rare.
Vanishingly rare.
But it messes up how we interpret the lab reports.
That is the real danger. Let's go back to Mrs. Jones. She's malnourished. Her albumin is low.
Hypoalbuminemia.
Right. She takes phenytoin for seizures. Phenytoin is highly protein-bound.
Yeah.
Because she has low albumin, she has fewer boats in her blood to carry the drug around. So her total phenytoin level on the lab report comes back low.
Okay.
Let's say it's 5 millicg/ml, and the normal range is 10 to 20.
The clinician looks at that number and panics. She's underdosed. She's going to have a seizure. Increase the dose.
But because her albumin is low, her free phenytoin, the active stuff that's actually swimming in the water and getting to the brain, might be perfectly normal. She just lacks the protein storage.
So if you increase the dose based on that low total number,
you drive the free level up into the toxic range. You cause toxicity because you are chasing a number that was artificially low due to the protein issue. Don't chase the red herring. Treat the patient, not the lab report.
That leads us perfectly into our final section, Section 6, the target concentration strategy. This is about judgment over math.
This is the synthesis. This is where it all comes together. We don't just set it and forget it. It's a feedback loop. Katsong outlines the steps. Choose your target more, predict V and CL, give the dose your man, measure the level drawn, and then revise your plan.
It's the measure and revise part that makes you a clinician, not a calculator. Let's bring it all home with Mrs. Jones one last time.
Okay, Mrs. Jones, heart failure, atrial fibrillation. We are using digoxin.
Step 1, predict. We already know her clearance is going to be compromised.
Right. Normal clearance for digoxin is about 7 liters per hour. But Mrs. Jones has heart failure. Her liver is congested, it's hypoxic, it's swollen with blood that isn't moving. So even though the liver cells are alive, they aren't working well. Her hepatic clearance might drop by, say, 50%.
So we predict her total clearance is only 3.5 liters per hour.
If we ignored that and gave the standard dose, we can predict her steady-state concentration would be 2 ng/ml. That's the toxic range. We want it to be 1 ng/ml.
So common sense, not some complex calculus, just basic common sense says, if her clearance is half of normal, I should probably give half the normal dose.
Exactly. That is turning numbers into care. So we give half the dose.
Okay, now, step 2, measure. When do we draw the blood? Does it matter?
Timing is everything. If you draw the blood 30 minutes after she takes her pill,
You're just measuring the absorption spike from her gut?
it's totally meaningless.
Yeah.
It tells you nothing about the steady state or the tissue levels. You have to wait until distribution is complete, which for digoxin is at least 6 hours after the dose. And ideally, you wait until she has taken that dose for 3 or 4 half-lives, maybe a week, to see if your maintenance regimen is actually working.
So we wait a week, we draw the trough level. Now, step 3, revise. The lab comes back, we predicted 1.0 ng/ml, it comes back at 1.1 ng/ml.
And this brings us to the 20% rule. If your measured concentration is within 20% of what you predicted, don't touch it.
Don't micromanage.
Don't. That tiny difference is just biological noise. It's lab error. It's she ate a salty meal yesterday. If you try to chase that number, you'll just be constantly tweaking the dose up and down, and you'll create a sawtooth pattern of your own making.
But what if it comes back at 0.4 ng/ml? That's way off from our target of 1.0.
Now you have to be a detective. Now you have to solve the mystery. Is her VEED much bigger than we thought? Is her clearance somehow better than we predicted? Or, and this is the big one, 90% of the time did she actually take the pill?
Compliance.
The biggest variable in all of pharmacology isn't the CYP450 enzyme system. It's whether the patient actually swallows the medicine.
We can do all this beautiful, elegant math, but if the pill is still sitting in the bottle on her nightstand, the concentration is 0.
And no equation in Goodman and Gilman can fix that. That requires a conversation.
Wow. We have really covered the entire spectrum, from that theoretical bridge of PK and PD all the way to the bedside adjustment for a congested liver in a specific patient.
It's a journey from the abstract to the very concrete.
So if we had to sum up this whole series finale, pharmacokinetics is not just about memorizing the table in Appendix 2.
No. It's about knowing which number in that table to use and when. It's knowing that for digoxin in an obese patient, you ignore the total body weight column. It's knowing that for morphine in a cirrhosis patient, you have to ignore the standard bioavailability because it's going to be way higher.
It's the art of the math, knowing when you have to calculate a loading dose because the seizure won't stop, knowing when to simplify and just give a daily pill for chronic therapy, and knowing when to ignore the total drug level because the patient's albumin is low.
That is the essence of clinical pharmacology. It's judgment.
Before we sign off on the series, give us one final provocative thought. We've mastered the operating system of today. What's the software update that's coming tomorrow?
Well, everything we've discussed today assumes the body is clearing the drug, the kidney filters it, the liver chews it up. It's an external process. But we're entering the era of biologics, monoclonal antibodies, antibody-drug conjugates.
The drugs that end in NetMap.
Right. And in that world, we're seeing a new phenomenon called target-mediated drug disposition. The drug binds to its target, let's say a receptor on a tumor cell. And that binding event is the elimination pathway. The target literally eats the drug.
So if you have a lot of tumor, you clear the drug faster.
Exactly. And as the therapy works and the tumor shrinks, the clearance slows down. The distinction we made at the very beginning between PK, what the body does to the drug, and PD, what the drug does to the body, it disappears. The effect is the clearance. The math we talked about today will have to evolve. The future is dynamic in a way we are just starting to model.
The effect is the clearance.
Yeah.
That is a mind bender to end on.
Something to mull over as the credits roll.
Listeners, this deep dive was your scaffold, but the building blocks are in the books. Open Katsung, Chapter 3. Open Goodman and Gilman, Appendix 2. Work the equations yourself. Look at the graphs.
Read the text that surrounds the tables. The real nuance is there.
You have the numbers. Now go provide the care. Thanks for listening to The Deep Dive.